Welcome, everyone. We are going to get started in just a moment. We're just waiting for a few more people to enter the room, and then we'll do some introductions. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this session. Mental health conditions, what are they, with Rob Wesseman. Rob is the Executive Director for NAMI Utah, and he is also the co-chair of the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness. Rob, thank you for being here, and I'll let you take it away.
Okay, fantastic. So we were talking a minute ago, there's a lot of sessions going on right now. So thank you everyone for joining here. Hopefully it's going to be relevant. I kind of shaped this, at first I thought, oh, we'll go through all the like DSM stuff. And then I thought, well, you can Google that if you want to. And then really, over the course of the last couple of days, those of you who were able to see the Silent Class movie on Wednesday, that was pretty powerful just in terms of, some of the work that we do and some of the things that we see. And so what I wanted to do here was get very specific about a couple of things that over my experience is important to know as we work with folks, because we do pretty hard stuff, and we work with people in crisis, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully this will be relevant. If not, give me a thumbs down, whatever it is. I don't know how this goes, but anyway, so let's jump in and let's start talking about some stuff. Okay, so first, I am the director here at NAMI, and NAMI is a national organization, National Alliance on Mental Illness. And NAMI is like the largest grassroots mental health education, advocacy, and support organization. And so one thing I want to point out right off the bat when we talk about what is a mental health condition. So some entities kind of divide, mental illness, mental health condition, et cetera, et cetera. NAMI kind of uses those terms interchangeably. One of the reasons is we are really a peer-driven, in a lot of ways, a volunteer organization. So we hear from people and they're like, I don't like mental illness. I want to, I like mental health condition, the term, et cetera. So we use that kind of a lot. So when I say that, it's kind of an all-encompassing term. So let's get kind of specific for a second and talk about, so all of that, what is it? So really, at the end of the day, a mental health condition is a condition that affects a person's thinking, feeling, behavior, or mood. And it can also deeply impact day-to-day living. It can really affect the ability to relate to others. And that's the key. And that's really what we're going to focus on. Not so much the label, but how it affects someone's life. And I think you might all agree, those of you that work in this field, that when we do encounter people that seem to be struggling with a mental health condition, it does affect their ability to relate to others and to interact and all of that. We're going to talk about some aspects of that and what we can do. One thing I will say right off the bat is there is no magic sentence that will allow you to just manage everyone's behavior. So if that's why you joined, I apologize right up front. But there are some things that we can do that can be very, very effective. Let's kind of continue. I know there's kind of a lot on here. One of the things that we tell people, and this is as part of someone's recovery, is that you're not alone. Like, lots of people are affected by mental health conditions. One of the problems is we still face the issue of stigma. So let's talk about these numbers in here. So kind of officially, about 1 in 5 US adults experience a mental health condition in a year. And so I've put a little note here. So if we include trauma, which is not formally a DSM diagnosis. So developmental trauma was proposed to be a diagnosis in the DSM. It was not proved the most recent go around. But if we include trauma, traumatic experiences, developmental trauma, et cetera, nearly all of the people we work with have some sort of trauma or mental health condition. They may not say it, but if you talk to people, you really get the understanding that, man, there's been a lot of trauma in this person's life. This next one is a little more concerning. So about 1 in 20 adults in the US experience a serious mental illness each year. So that is, those are considered bipolar illness, major depression, and schizophrenia and the psychotic disorders. However, about 1 in 3 of the people we work with have these conditions, approximately. 1 in 4, 1 in 3, it kind of depends. And that's pretty significant. I mean, if you think about, I mean, it really is about, I don't know if these numbers are going to work, but we hear 1 to 2% of the population in a given year experience these serious mental health conditions, but many, many more than that, 25 to 35% of the individuals we work with. So it's helpful to know that. And then 1 in 6 US youth age 6 to 17 experience a mental health condition each year. And then so if we think about the youth who seek services from us, and if we include trauma, it's basically all of them. When I was at when I worked at the VOA Youth Center for a number of years, the YRC, I would say less than half of the kids that were there would say, yeah, I've got some trauma. But if you talk to them, they would describe incredibly traumatic situations. Again, it's nice to have that in the back of our minds. And then something else to note as well, especially as we work with kids, families, young people, 50% of lifetime mental illness presents itself by age 14 and 75% by age 24. And it varies a little bit in gender, but that's pretty well situated. And so, the other thing, I don't know if you knew those numbers, that's kind of what we see. And so I think the next thing to talk about is a mental health condition is not, this happened, now I have this condition, right? Like there are multiple issues going on here. So genetics seems to play a factor. If you've got blood relatives with, major depression, if you have a blood relative with schizophrenia, you're more likely to develop these illnesses. Environment, obviously, as we talk about, if we think about the environment that the folks we work with, that they exist in, it's incredibly challenging. Lifestyle influences. So I don't make as much about that one because I think, especially for us, I think it's not, oh gosh, I would like to be this way. For the folks we work with, it's kind of like all of these things that have happened that kind of squish them in a place where there is substance use disorder, there is violence, there's lack of healthy diet. All of those pieces can play a part in it. And then if you think about, so I was just talking, so stressful home life, stressful employment, et cetera, can make you, just stress in general, can make you more susceptible in traumatic life events, as we've talked about. And then we don't understand as much about this. There's lots of research going on into basic brain structure, like are there predispositions in some way? And that seems a little far off in terms of being able to understand, but the research is happening. I think the thing that's important is that people understand, especially from us, and we're going to get into this more because we play a pretty important role in like our folks' existence. A lot of times we might be the only people who talk to them on a regular basis or whatever. And so, having a mental health condition, experiencing trauma, doesn't mean you're broken. Doesn't mean that anyone did anything wrong. I mean, sure, maybe the family life was not awesome. Maybe there were some mistakes, whatever, but everybody's doing it as good as they can. The important thing to remember is it's not anybody's fault. I mean, we at NAMI see this all the time. We hear it all the time where parents call and just say, what did I do? how did I do this to my child? Lots of guilt, or the person. And we're going to talk a little bit more about an individual's experience, like, no, I don't have an issue, or, how could that be? And, all that kind of stuff. We very much believe that anyone can recover. So unfortunately, what we tend to see are a lot of individuals that aren't receiving treatment. And we're going to talk a little bit about treatment access. And so what we see in our work is people who are untreated. And it's a very negative situation. And there's some specifics that we'll talk about what we should watch for in individuals with untreated mental health conditions. But we maintain that folks can recover, that people can lead meaningful lives. And I think if you've worked with folks who maybe have achieved stability in some way or another, if they've received supportive housing, or if they've been able to, just provide, develop some of the supports they need, they can live meaningful lives. And it's not an end of the world kind of thing. So let's move on here.
Hey, Rob, you have a question just while you're switching slides. Are
Yeah.
there NAMI volunteer workers in the Uinta Basin?
So I can take just a minute and talk about kind of where NAMI is at the moment. So with the pandemic, we really shifted all of our offerings to the virtual space. And so really we have support groups, we have education classes, all of them at no cost to the participants. And all of it's available online. If you just go to our website, you can see when the classes start. They're going on all the time. We've really had to kind of rethink kind of in-person stuff, and it's not saying we won't do it, but we're not quite there yet. We're still in a very high COVID transmission area, and we recognize that, our clients tend to be incredibly vulnerable, which we're going to talk about here in terms of accessing care. So appreciate the question. Check out our website, namiut.org. I'm selling a product, so it's all free of charge. Check that out, and yeah, thank you for the question. So as we talk about these mental health conditions, so in general population, only about half the people who have a mental health condition receive treatment. Lots of reasons for that. Some is that access is difficult. Some is that we still have stigma, and if you slip and break your arm, I don't know really anyone, I mean, maybe a few people, but most folks tend to go, oh crud, my arm's broke, I better seek medical attention. But if someone's experiencing symptoms of major depression and cannot get out of bed and cannot function the way they had been previously, we're not as likely to rush out and seek care. And that's one of the things NAMI really hopes to change, is this whole idea of stigma. Now, I will say, over the past few years, I feel very encouraged by a couple of things. One is, we seem to see people discussing mental health conditions much more frequently. And one thing I use to gauge this is, what are the number of bills during the legislative session between January and March? What are the number of kind of mental health related bills that are proposed at the session? And those have increased significantly over the years, which, if nothing else, means that more people are talking about this. And one of the things that we really, really want to talk about, especially here, is that, and as you saw, I will say that mental illness is not the reason for homelessness. I mean, for those of you who listened to Dr. Simbaris yesterday, lack of affordable housing is the reason for homelessness. I mean, we had, as Dr. Simbaris said, we had mental health issues, we had substance use disorders, we had all of that prior to the big, presentation of homelessness as we know it. However, for folks to be successful who have a mental health condition, they do require stabilization, treatment, support, etc. So in general, 50% of folks receive care for their mental illness. It's even lower in lower socioeconomic status, specific ethnic groups. It's even lower than that for the reasons we talked about. And then in general, people experiencing homelessness access healthcare. So this is all healthcare. This is medical, substance use treatment, behavioral health interventions, et cetera. Only about 20, as near as I could tell, about 25% receive the care they need, and I should check with 4th Street Clinic on that. My thought is it might even be lower in some areas because it's just incredibly difficult. Folks are trying to survive day to day. Very difficult to make an appointment, get to an appointment, et cetera. And I know we have really good outreach teams. 4th Street Clinic does mobile care, et cetera. So as I was thinking about this, I think one thing specifically that we should talk about in our work with folks experiencing homelessness is this term anosognosia. It's Greek. So I'm just going to read this because I think this is kind of important for us. When someone rejects a diagnosis of mental illness, it's tempting to say that they're in denial. But someone with acute mental illness may not be thinking clearly enough to consciously choose denial. They may instead be experiencing a lack of insight or a lack of awareness. So the formal medical term for this condition is anosognosia, from Greek meaning to not know a disease. So here's why I think this is important. We're going to encounter a lot of people, and especially young people who are, maybe unfortunately developing a psychotic disorder of some sort. It tends to hit teen boys, late teens, early 20s. And we saw some of that at the youth center. And I mean, how do you deal with that? Like, wait a minute, what you're telling me my brain doesn't work the way others do. No, that's bullcrud. I can think, you know what I mean? It's incredibly, incredibly difficult. So when we talk about it with mental illness, the person is unaware of their own mental health condition, or they can't really perceive the condition accurately. They don't really see what it's causing or what's happening because of, especially the untreated condition. And it's pretty common, like I said, with thought disorders, with psychotic disorders, schizophrenia, bipolar illness. Bipolar illness, if you talk to people, they feel so amazing for a few days out of their cycle. And they're like, no, I'm fine. I can do what I need to do. So the other thing to think about too is self-awareness varies over time, right? So as someone, especially in our situations, if they can get to a stable situation, so they can acknowledge the illness, maybe they receive treatment, they talk to therapists and peer supports, et cetera. They begin to, okay, well, I'm learning about this. What do I need to know, et cetera, et cetera. Stability is critical. I mean, if we're talking about people who are experiencing homelessness, unsheltered homelessness, in a resource center, et cetera, it's a pretty unstable environment, and it makes it really, really difficult to kind of sort through and say, okay, what is going on with me, and what do I need to do? So I'm going to jump. We do have a question, so I'm just going to jump to that just really quick. So let's see, when you reach out to mental health providers, there's a 3 to 7 month wait list, and clients are like, okay, what the heck am I going to do? So this is a huge issue in terms of, accessing treatment. So if I call and I'm ready to go, right, and they tell me, oh, it's going to be 7 months. Well, that's not even helpful. So there is a couple of things. So one of the things, if the person is not in crisis, peer supports can be helpful. There are peer support groups where people can talk with others, share what's going on with them, et cetera, et cetera. NAMI does offer those virtual peer support groups at the moment. There are others out in the community that can be a start, but again, it doesn't really work for people in crisis. So we have to keep that in mind. And unfortunately, a lot of times if someone is in crisis, they can access crisis care, but usually only for a short period of time. And I know lots of folks locally are working on the healthcare worker shortage. I'm not sure what we're going to see, but at NAMI, we're really trying to support the integration of peer supports because we think that can be really helpful. So yeah, there's not good answers right now, but it's a great question, and it's something we all need to keep working on for sure. So we talked about this kind of, I don't really know what's happening. I know I don't have an illness, etc. So why is it important? So for a person with anosognosia, the inaccurate insight feels as real and convincing as other people's ability to perceive themselves. So like, no, I'm here and I'm fine and I can understand what I'm thinking, et cetera, et cetera. So the big issue is that those misperceptions can cause conflicts with others and it increases anxiety. Because when you talk to people, they're like, why don't people understand me? And it causes anxiety. And I'm sure all of you have experienced this where you are working with someone who is very anxious and they're like, I just don't understand. Maybe they don't understand the situation. They don't understand why people treat them the way they do, et cetera, et cetera. And so, so if I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm fine, it seems to be everybody else around me, then I'm not going to take my meds because I don't need to take my meds. It's issues going on around here. And so, one of the things, and we are going to talk about, so what can we do? Like, what should we do? We're working with these individuals that aren't really recognizing that they have a mental health condition. So what's important for us to be thinking about? So I would say, first off, we for the most part don't have to convince someone they have a diagnosis. It's really not critical at this stage. So I would say outreach, not critical. At a resource center, not critical. Now, what I will acknowledge is what is critical, especially in facilities, programs, research or resource centers, day drop-in centers, et cetera, et cetera. There are expectations, and those are of everyone, not whatever. So the fact that someone may be experiencing a mental health condition, maybe doesn't really recognize it, doesn't mean that we are unable to require them to be, kind of working with the program, doing what we need folks to do. It's a safety issue. We used to always talk about, make it about safety when you're asking folks to do things, because it really is. At the end of the day, it's about keeping everybody safe, everyone, including that individual. But we don't need to get too stuck. And honestly, I've done clinical work with folks as well. And that's not the first goal. The first goal really can be, let's just establish a relationship. Because as I mentioned earlier, and as we see, people don't treat our folks very well. And we tend to be some of the only people that look them in the eye, say hello, talk to them a little bit, listen to them a little bit. And really at this stage of the game, when someone is, experiencing homelessness, maybe their emotions are very dysregulated, they don't eat properly, they don't sleep properly, they've experienced continued trauma, et cetera. I cannot overemphasize the importance of a positive relationship and like we're it, right? Like I've had people tell me that I was the first person that actually talked to them in weeks, other than maybe some friends on the street. But like, if they talk about, in general, people ignore them. And so we're in a unique position. I think it's pretty cool. And so again, that positive relationship, just that hey, I'm here and I'm going to try and help. And we can still have expectations. I mean, I don't want people to think, oh, well, I can't ask them to, sit in the place they need to, or whatever. We can't. We can still have expectations. And we can have a positive relationship. And then kind of going along with that, as we display empathy and compassion to people, they'll start to trust us a little bit, because that's a huge piece. They have very little reason to trust most of what happens in their lives. And so if we can get past that, it's the thing as far as I'm concerned, and I'm going to beat that to death more in a minute. So anyway, so let's talk a little bit about maybe some of the specifics. Like we talked a little on the slide with the numbers and such. So basically everyone we work with has experienced a significant trauma. I mean, I have not talked to anyone, and it could be anything. It can be family. It can be something very young. It could be people in their community. It could be, you name it. These folks have experienced traumatic events. And then as we get back to, so about a third of the folks that we work with have a serious mental health condition. So they've got something that is significantly interfering with their ability to interact, what we would say is appropriately. They may be responding to internal stimuli. They may be hearing voices. They may be doing all of those things. And it's important to be aware of that. Again, it's not a reason not to have like programmatic expectations or even interaction expectations. However, I will say that as much room, if you will, as we can give these folks. So I'll give you an example from the youth center. I always kind of used to like it when I was talking with someone and they were kind of, getting pretty grumpy about stuff, and they would tell me to F off or whatever. Because I always took that as kind of a sign of trust in a way, right? Or a test. It's kind of a test. That person kind of subconsciously is saying, I can reject you first because everyone else has rejected me. So I'm going to unload, and let's see what you do. And so we always used to talk about, if everyone can stay safe and someone can unload, let them. Because that's another way we can establish trust. You can't always. And if safety is a consideration, if someone is threatening safety, then we can't give them that room, right? But if there is a way, and I know the outreach folks do this quite a bit, if there's a way to let someone express their frustration, maybe inappropriately or whatever, if you can do that, it's amazing what that does. People will come back and go, man, thank you. I expected to get kicked out. I thought you were going to, do whatever, etc. So it's not like we can just gloss over the fact that folks are struggling with these mental health conditions. We're simply ensuring that to the extent that we can, we're approaching them with empathy and compassion, that we are still, implementing the requirements of the program, etc. But if there is room in there, especially as long as no one's safety is concerned, it goes a tremendously long way to establishing a positive relationship with these folks and getting them on the road, right? That's like the reason we do all this, is we want them to hopefully build trust and then accept some of the interventions that we might have to offer and get into maybe a stable housing situation, and then maybe extend that trust to the other folks around them. And it's cool to watch when we are able to do it. We're trying to get more housing so we can do it more and more. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. So now I'm going to kind of get to the. So when I put this together, I wanted to keep it as like meaningful as possible, hopefully, right? So I do think it's meaningful when we understand that a lot of people kind of reject the fact that maybe there's a mental health condition going on, and that's okay. Like, we don't, we talked about that. So really, what can we do? Like, what can you take away from this? Tuck in the back of your mind. And I suspect that a lot of you kind of do this already. And it's really silly, but just be nice. I mean, I was going to try and put, what's the name of that old movie? Uh, Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze. Look it up. There's a part where he's a bouncer in this really rough bar, right? And he's telling all the bouncers, be nice. If someone needs to be escorted out, be nice. And so he goes through this whole thing. And I think it's funny and relevant because there's a couple of things. We talked about when you're working in, especially in a program, like outreach, you got a little more room, people can walk away, et cetera. It's a little different. Not always, but a little bit. But if you're in a program, there's rules, right? You got, there's like 200 or 300 people in there. And so we all have to kind of work together. So and we also used to talk about this at the YRC, is like when we have to deliver a request or even a consequence or whatever, we be respectful. Because if we deliver a request or a consequence and we're mad, now it becomes like a punishment. Now, I'm not saying, oh gosh, Johnny, you have just really hurt everyone and we want you to leave. It has to be appropriate, but be respectful. And this helped me. If I always just thought in the back of my mind, be nice, it changes how you approach stuff. So, and like I said, I am sure that lots of you do this, if not all of you, because you do this work, right? I'm not saying everyone in the community does it, but we'll work on that as well. So it really, it makes so much difference because the person is on this journey, right? And as they get to us, and I focus on outreach and the resource centers because that's where a lot of our folks are. It's like the touch point. It genuinely makes the most difference. Like, we could know the DSM and all the diagnoses inside and out. Our clients do not care. They don't. Trust me. Like, at least the ones I've worked with, and I've worked with a lot, they don't care. They do not care. What they care about is how you treat them, how you interact with them. But let's get a little more specific because there are a couple things that we can do. So one thing is, and I think this is one of the opportunities, is be aware of how you are feeling when you're working with people. Because I think, and I had a stage where I thought, oh, I can think one thing about a person, but then I can like talk differently to them and they won't even know. Like, I could think to myself, oh my gosh, why is this person making my life so miserable? And then I would be like, oh, Johnny, good to see you, whatever. No, as soon as you work with our folks for about a day, you're like, oh crap, they kind of know exactly how I'm feeling, and they kind of have to. As you talk to people, they need to know where someone's really coming from. They're really, really good at it. So be aware of how you're feeling, and it's funny because Alicia's doing a thing in the other room about like self-care and stuff. And this goes hand in hand. Like, if you're aware of how you're feeling and thinking, okay, I got this, it ends up being a little easier. So, and here's why. So like, I take great pride in the work we do. Not very many people do this. And it's pretty dang hard. We work with very difficult situations in very difficult situations. So I always try to think, this is pretty cool work that not many people do, and have pride in that. Like, we see things that most people don't see, and then they get all grumpy about it. And you're just like, oh man, if you even knew what you were talking about, you'd probably change your tune. So we talked a little bit about, have that little be nice there, like, okay, I'm gonna be nice. I'm gonna, be respectful. Whatever term works for you. Nice might be a little weird. I like compassionate. I like empathetic, something like that. But again, part of it, and this is probably what Alicia's talking about, is like, we do cool stuff and we should feel very good about the stuff we do because it is so important. And I know that, I will say that sometimes I'm in meetings with, I don't know, leadership in communities or, members of communities or whatever, and they're really pretty mean to us and the people we work with. And I kind of feel badly. I feel badly for them because they're missing the whole thing. And this is something else that we can talk about is if I'm thinking that I'm doing pretty cool stuff, and yeah, it's hard. And if I also think to myself, genuinely for real, the folks I'm working with are not standing in front of me just to make my life miserable. Because they're not. I mean, that's what like the general population seems to think is, oh, this guy on the street is there to make my life bad. No, he really isn't. He's there because of a lot of things have happened. And we should be doing a bit better job to make sure that they don't get to that spot. So anyway, a little bit of a tirade there, but yeah, I think this is cool stuff. And yeah, it's very hard. It's incredibly hard. But if we can integrate those ideas, I understand that this person doesn't really recognize their mental health condition or what it's even doing or whatever. And so I can work with that. I want to be as compassionate, as empathetic, as nice as possible, while still doing the work that I kind of need to do to keep everyone safe. So as I'm thinking, I'm going to be as compassionate, empathetic, as nice as possible. It's easier. It really genuinely is. The most frustrating time is when I have an expectation that something I say is going to make someone behave a different way and they don't. And I'm like, ugh. So it's either you're a jerk, you didn't do what I said, or I'm terrible and I don't know what I'm doing. And I would invite you to kind of toss those ideas. I was able to, and doesn't mean it's not frustrating. Oh my gosh, like people can be wicked frustrating. But at the end of the day, you're doing stuff most people won't do. It's cool work. And if you're thinking that way, the people around you, the people you're working with, they're going to sense it. And it's just easier. It is so hard. Another tangent. Here we go. You gave me the microphone. So there you go. When people are so mad all the time, like we had a meeting with someone fairly recently, kind of in a leadership position, not like official city, county leadership, just someone in the community who's very powerful. And in my mind, they should have every reason to just be pretty pumped about things like, oh, I'm awesome. I do this and I'm that. I'm pretty powerful. I got some money, et cetera, et cetera. And they were the grumpiest person I've like ever met. And I'm thinking, I just don't get that, man. Like you are like grumpier than a lot of people I talk to on the street who have nothing. And you're all mad about stuff. And it just seemed like that's not a great way to go. And so I think if we can just integrate a little bit of that, make it a little more fun for us, it really translates to the clients and what they feel about it and such. So I have to be honest, I'm not even sure what time I'm supposed to go to here.
That is okay, Rob. You have about 20 minutes. You also have a hand raised in the attendees.
Okay.
Carolyn De Herrera.
Oh, hello.
No, sorry.
Hi, Carolyn. Do you have a question, Carolyn? She's unmuted.
No question, Carolyn? Accidental hand raised? Okay.
Well, that's okay. I'm very, very nice to see you, Carolyn. Carolyn and I worked together for a long time. So very nice to hear from Carolyn. Okay, so, well, so here's what I'm going to do at this
Oh,
point.
sorry,
Oh,
Rob, you have one more hand raised. Claudia Payer.
go, Claudia. So I think you can unmute, Claudia.
Oh, it looks like she.
Yeah, just if we could get a little bit more. Sorry, I'm Robbie. We have a team here under Claudia.
Oh, cool.
Gail Miller. If you could get a little bit more into like maybe a little bit more disorders, like how you would interact and be nice to someone who's having maybe a psychotic episode or schizophrenic, something along those lines.
Yeah. So a couple of things. So one of the things, and I went to school a long time ago, but one of the things they always used to talk about was, don't join the client's delusion. And I agree with that. Like if they're saying, oh, some powerful historic figure is standing right next to you and they're doing all this stuff. But what you can do is listen. You don't have to, oh no, that's not true, et cetera, et cetera. Ask them how they're doing. And so again, I know these are things that you guys all do. Don't be too concerned about so there's two things to think about. Are they capable of being in an environment? So if I think you said you're at the Gale. So if you're in an environment where people have to interact with each other safely and there's a level of expectation of behavior, et cetera, and someone maybe is seemingly responding to stimuli or whatever they're doing. I think the idea is ask them how they're doing. They may be somewhat agitated. If you can do some de-escalation, hey, do you want to just sit here for a minute? And I don't know the confines of your specific programming. I suspect it's kind of hard to tell everyone to wait while you take someone and have a 30-minute yoga session or something. But if there is a space for someone to kind of, de-escalate, et cetera, you can always ask them, hey, do you think you'll be okay? I don't know, eating with other folks here in the dining room, or will you be okay in your bunk tonight, et cetera, et cetera. Really, the key is that they're very dysregulated sometimes. They've been on the street, they're responding to these things. They may not have eaten, sometimes in days. If you can simply, because you still want to put your request in, right? Hey, can you be safe in this bunk tonight? Is there anything that we can do? So what you have to pay attention to is you do need to be aware of the content of what the delusion seems to be, right? If their delusion is that person in the bunk next to me is going to get up in the middle of the night and hurt me, that's obviously a warning sign. So again, as you ask them, can you be safe? If their delusion is very specific to either their situation, sometimes there's it seems to be religious delusions. Oh, Jesus is over me, or however it may be, or political delusions, especially if they sit with their friends over at one of the other permanent supportive housing facilities and watch a particular news outlet. Is that veiled enough? So yeah, there's political delusions. But if the delusion seems to be focused on people like that you can identify that are right there, you need to ask a few more questions, and then that may end up being a call to MCOT or the crisis line, those kinds of things. Unfortunately, what I found is many times simply engaging the person and talking and asking some questions, because what that tends to do is refocus their delusion. If you ask them something, because then they have to respond to you rather than the delusion, and sometimes they can line them up. But again, I would say that the key piece to that is the content locally focused. Harmful focus, like in general, oh, I'm going to come in and harm people, or someone's going to do it. That's something that you need to deal with. If you can get the person aligned, agree that they're okay, that they can be in a bunk, that they can be in the lunchroom, wherever they can be. I think that's the piece. It's a good question.
We have one in the typed questions. What are some resources I can give to families with children who are struggling with mental health or behavioral issues? Places like the Children's Center also have a long wait list.
Yeah, this one is really difficult. So yeah, Children's Center, long wait list. So one of the things you can look at, and again, I don't know, it seems like different schools and school districts have different like opportunities or different options. Some have programs, some don't have programs. So I would check with schools. And this one I'm not as familiar with. It seems as though community action might have kind of related to, well, I'll just say related to some of the community action programming. There may be resources there. I think what is important for folks is thinking about what outside of that clinical realm might be helpful for folks. So you could look at parent supports. So one thing that NAMI does offer, and a few other agencies, are like parent kind of education courses, which do a couple of things. It's not like parenting classes per se. What we offer is a parent-focused view of mental health conditions that children may be experiencing. And then that also gives people an opportunity to connect with other parents who maybe are struggling with some of these things. The other thing I would ask, and I don't know this, is do clinical facilities like Children's Center, et cetera, provide similar opportunities for simply education? Because anything a parent can do to better understand a potential mental health condition a child is facing, the more comfortable and confident they're going to feel in responding to it. That's what we hear kind of most often, is parents are like, I have no idea. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And unfortunately, the default is, what did I do wrong? That's almost always where people go, is I'm a failure as a parent. I did this, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not anyone's fault. It's a thing. It's an issue that we want to address. But laying blame doesn't get us where we need to be. It just makes people feel badly. So I think the biggest thing is trying to expand beyond specific clinical interventions and see what else is potentially available for folks.
We have about 10 minutes left. I don't know if you have more slides. There is one more question in the typed questions. Would you like to take that?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I'll just read it.
Perfect.
So we get quite a few calls from family members wanting to check on their loved ones. So, okay, so this one tends to be, well, I'm sorry. This one is kind of legally based, right? And you all know this as well. So your facility is going to have HIPAA guidelines that you've adopted within your facility. And I suspect that you, in one way or another, provide those to your clients. So someone shows up to a resource center, they sign in. Part of that is probably their like HIPAA protections. So basically what those say is they basically tell them, hey, we're going to put a little bit of your info into HMIS so we can keep track of what you're doing. Other agencies may be able to see that you are here, but they can't see any of your notes. Other agencies within HMIS, I should say. And then there might be a spot for them to say, hey, if someone calls and asks about me, you can tell them I'm here. Don't tell them I'm here, whatever it may be. So that one really becomes like an operating procedure. So if you don't know what the operating procedure is, check with your boss and see. I mean, sometimes there isn't a specific operating procedure, but it really has to be, basically the bottom line is, if the person is an adult, if they are over 18, they have to give specific permission for you to tell anyone who calls that they are in the facility. That's kind of the bottom line. That also goes for people like POs and such like that. So when I was at VOA doing substance use treatment, we had to be very specific about, okay, you've got a PO and they've requested to get information from you. Can we give them that information? Now, people could say no, and then it was kind of a mess because then they'd get in trouble with their PO. But we just want people to understand, if someone requests, now they have to be very specific. So it would be, if my mom calls, you can tell her, but if my dad calls, you cannot tell him. It can be to that level of specificity. So it really just ends up being like a company procedure. Okay, so I am gonna share, I'll share one other thing and then we'll have just a minute for any additional questions. So I want to leave a quote. And I think this is pretty important. And I kind of recite this to myself a lot as well. So I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. That was Maya Angelou. And I tend to agree with that. In fact, I kind of got goosebumps even reading it just now in front of you all, because it is true. And when I talk to people who are experiencing homelessness, they have a lot of how people made them feel. And if we can be one of the ones that made them feel a little bit better than the rest of the world, because you've seen it. I've seen the most horrible hatred aimed at people experiencing homelessness. It's pretty awful, and you've seen it too. And if we can make it just a little better, I think it's incredibly powerful. So I want you to think about that. So put that in there. A lot of times people don't understand their mental illness very well, but we don't really need to, we're not tasked with getting them to acknowledge it, just that, we can talk with them and see if we can come to some agreement and understanding about what needs to happen. And then the be nice thing, and look up that stupid movie because it is actually pretty funny. So that's kind of it for me. Any other kind of final questions? Okay. Well, I just want to thank everyone. This is actually pretty fun. I'm sitting at my desk talking to myself in my office, and it's kind of cool. So thanks everyone for joining. I appreciate it. Looks like we had pretty good attendance. I'm very flattered considering we had 3 other sessions, including Alicia. So maybe afterwards, I know these are going to be recorded and available for some time. Make sure you check out Alicia's as well, because it goes hand in hand. As we take care of ourselves, we do a really good job taking care of others. So check that one out also. Let's see, it looks like another QA popped up real fast. Awesome. Thank you, Travis. Appreciate it. Okay, everyone. Well, I think that's it. So I think we'll just wrap up. Steph?
Thank you, Rob. Thank you so much for taking time to be here with us today. We always love your perspective, and thank you. So thank you to everyone for participating, and we hope to virtually see you in the last session of our summit after lunch.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. See ya.